about to start something fun. So
it is. And today's fun topic, of course, is my favorite topic to discuss, which is quarterback. So
yes,
absolutely. And there's a lot of different ways we can go with this, Vince. I mean, we can, and we're going to talk about a lot of them. You know, we're going to talk about the players and all those kind of things. But the intriguing thing, Vince, is, you know, we've asked the question, you know, what's the problem at Notre Dame? Is it recruiting? Sure. Is it development? You know, what's the reason? Who's holding the quarterback position group back? And one of our theories has been for years is that it's Brian Kelly.
Sure.
Well, we don't have Brian Kelly around to blame for that anymore. So this is our first chance to really see where this position group truly is. And if it is just is it a player problem? Is it a development problem that went beyond Brian Kelly? Was it Brian Kelly? This will be our first chance to really get a look at, you know, just what was Brian Kelly's role in enhancing the quarterback play or taking away from the quarterback play.
No, absolutely. And because this is a huge offseason because you're transitioning from one quarterback to another, right? And the quarterback that you're transitioning to is going to be a true sophomore, right? I mean, he was the third stringer in practice, even though he had a package that he would work with. But I mean, on the depth chart, he was third string. I mean, that's what I'll go with. And we're going to see when we're talking about development and we're talking about Tom Rees and we're talking about how good of a quarterback coach he is, because well, look, we've seen in the chat numerous times about how, you know, Marcus Freeman needs to go out and get a quarterback coach separate from the offensive coordinator and all these different things. Well, we're going to see what kind of quarterback coach that Tom Rees is this offseason because this Tyler Buchner is his guy. He recruited him. He brought him to Notre Dame, right? He has been his quarterback coach the whole time. He is going to get QB1 reps, if not QB1 competition reps with Drew Pine.
Yeah, and I do think it's going to be a legitimate,
and it should be
battle.
It should be, but his reps are going to increase.
Drew Pine out, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, his reps are going to increase though, and the focus is going to be on him and Drew Pine as far as development is concerned. So if he doesn't develop the way we think he should, then there's no more. The finger has to go back.
Well, and I don't even point to Tyler Buchner. I think it's both of them. I mean, look, for me, before we dive into the specifics of the players, it's between Drew Pine and Tyler Buchner. If you can't get a legit quarterback play out of those from one of those two,
right,
then I got to question the development of Tommy Rees. And you can't blame Brian Kelly anymore. Drew Pine's going to be a junior next year. He was a borderline top 100 recruit. Yeah. Tyler Buchner was a top 100 recruit. He's going to be a sophomore. Well, in today's era, sophomore's not young anymore, right? Sophomore is still young-ish, but we've seen many quarterbacks go win championships or at least play for championships as second-year players.
Sure.
So all the things that we discussed in regards to understanding why Tyler Buchner wasn't further ahead, we talked about during the preseason. You really can't look at those things anymore because him not playing as a senior, that impacted 2021. That shouldn't impact 2022 if he's being developed properly. So, as you mentioned, he's going to get a ton of reps. Drew Pine's going to get a ton of reps. You know, those kids can both play, and if you can't get a quality quarterback play from that duo in some capacity, then you can't really blame Brian Kelly for that anymore.
Oh, no, not at all.
And that's the thing. So this is a big offseason for Tommy Rees, just as much as it is for Marcus Freeman or anybody else, because, you know, Tommy Rees wanted autonomy, right? That's what he wanted, and that's what he's getting. Marcus Freeman, for better or worse, is letting Tommy Rees determine who he's going to hire on offense. It is what it is. We'll find out if that's the right move or not. Right. But the reality is Tommy Rees wanted autonomy and he's getting it. Well, with autonomy comes responsibility. And we can't, you know, because it was funny. It was always one of those things because Kelly was sort of an offensive guy. There was always sort of this whenever a bad call was made, it was like, why would Kelly make that call?
Yeah.
Right. When a good call was made, it was like, oh, great call by Rees. Right. Well, you don't have that anymore. No one's like,
Right.
why did Marcus Freeman get on the horn and make that call? No, that wasn't it. Right. This is Tommy Rees's deal now. And so he's going to have to figure out, like, okay, what can I do to make sure we're getting faster starts? What can we do to make sure we're adjusting better? So there's all those things to talk about. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing is going to be quarterback development.
Absolutely.
And you had a savvy veteran player last year that was limited from a playmaking standpoint. Now you're going to flip the script completely. You're not going to have real veteran players, real experienced guys, the rocks that you can kind of lean on in those big moments. You're going to have young guys. But you're going to have young guys that are more talented than the guy you lost.
Right.
Especially Tyler Buchner. Again, we think Tyler Buchner's going to win the job, but he's going to have to earn it from Drew Pine. Drew Pine's not going to go down without a fight. But Buchner especially is a playmaker. And I think Drew Pine even brings more of that playmaking ability to the table than Jack Cohn did. Jack Cohn needed to be the guy in 2021. That's not the point. The point is,
that's not the argument.
Moving forward, you can't say, well, we don't have the players, we don't have this, we don't have that. You recruited these guys, right? So if Notre Dame doesn't have the talent at quarterback to be successful, who recruited every quarterback on the roster right now?
Right.
Tommy Rees did.
Yep.
He's going into year 6 as the quarterback's coach and year 3 as the offensive coordinator. If you're lacking the quarterback talent, that's on you. If your quarterbacks can't play to a certain level, that's on you. And so we're going to find out this year just how good Tommy Rees is. And then on the flip side of that, if Drew Pine and Tyler Buchner are as good as we think they are, and Brian Kelly is in fact the person that was holding the quarterback position group out, we're going to find that out too, and we're going to realize Tommy Rees is in fact the young star in the making, right? So it's one of those two things to me is going to be the case. Now, that doesn't mean they either play terrible or one of them wins the Heisman. That's not what we're talking about. It's just about seeing growth and improvement from season to season and then from end the season in those type of areas. And so that's what's at the end of the day going to make this a really interesting discussion. And, because the other thing too is Tommy Rees is responsible for what the quarterback room looks like. And if he does, look, there's a way for him to get these kind of comments, like David Solomon says. I blame Brian Kelly and Rees for not playing Jurkovec. No one can convince me he couldn't have had the same success as Ian Book had, and most importantly, he could throw the ball downfield. Book could not. I disagree. I agree with what David is saying there, right? So if you're Tommy Rees and you want to get people to stop talking about Phil Jurkovec, then develop the guys that you have now and get them to play at a high level. I mean, that's the deal, right? Because otherwise, if your quarterback play isn't good and Jurkovec's playing well for BC, it's going to be like, well, you could have had that guy, right? And that's what's going to make this a real fun and interesting conversation. Because I'd like to stop talking about Jurkovec. He's not here anymore, right? Like, no, I agree with love the kid. I think he's a great player. I think he's going to have a big year. My opinion of him hasn't changed. Everything that I thought about him and what Notre Dame could have been with him. But the reality is he's gone, and he's been gone for multiple years now. It's time to focus on what is here. But if you're Tommy Rees and you're sick of people talking about Phil Jurkovec, then get your current roster to play at a high level. Well, and then that'll get people to stop talking about it.
Here's my thing about this season and the quarterback position and the offense and all of those different things. Last year, there were built-in excuses for Tommy Rees and the quarterback position. Offensive line was poor, wide receivers couldn't get off press coverage, all of those different things. Like there were, and look, and I'm not saying they weren't legitimate excuses, because they were absolutely legitimate excuses that at times the offensive line didn't even exist, and Jack Cohn was a sitting duck. Like that, no question, right? And Tommy Rees had to scheme and do some things because of what the offensive line was, because of what the wide receivers were able to do and not able to do. To me, with the changes that have been made to the coaching staff and the different things with personnel at other positions, those excuses are gone. Like, you're not going to have those excuses anymore. And I don't feel like we're going to be able to come onto a show after like a post-game show and be like, well, there's nothing the quarterback could have done. The offensive line was terrible. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I don't think that those excuses are going to exist. Now, maybe in a bubble here and there, there might be issues game to
They may
game.
not play well in a particular
Right.
game, sure.
But overall, the
Right.
overarching issues that there were last year with both of those position groups, I don't believe are going to be an issue this year. So it's going to put the spotlight even more on the quarterback development from a coaching standpoint and from a player standpoint. And I think that's really important to understand. Like some of those get out of jail free cards aren't going to be there anymore.
Right. And because you're like you said, your depth chart's going to be better this year. Now, here's the interesting thing too is looking at the schedule this year, there's some challenging games on here. And you're gonna some of the things Notre Dame was able to get away with this year because the schedule was not good. We talked about this, and you could go back and say that about multiple seasons since 2017, after 2017, because that was a very hard schedule. You're going to get back to more of a typical Notre Dame schedule next year. We expect USC to be better. I don't think USC is necessarily going to be national championship contenders next year, but they're going to have Caleb Williams. They got Mario Williams. They have Lincoln Riley. They're going to be better. Clemson's going to be a top 10 team. Ohio State's going to be a top 10 team. Absolutely. BYU is going to be a top 25 team. There's several. North Carolina is going to have a chance to be a top 25 team again. Boston College is going to be a top 25 team. With Jurkovic and Zay Flowers coming back and decent chunk of their offensive line coming back. So you're going to need you're going to have. That's another reason, practically speaking, the quarterback play is going to have to be better because to manage the schedule, the quarterback play is going to have to be good enough to manage it. Whereas in the past, you could kind of win in spite of quarterback play at times. And they did that early in 2021 when Jack Cohn wasn't playing great. They won at times in spite of the quarterback play. Later in the year, that changed, and Jack Cohn finished his career on a very, very high note and really good stretch of football.
Sure.
But the quarterback position struggled. Well, a lot of it, people will say, is, well, it's on Brian Kelly. Well, okay, we're going to find out now. And that's